What have I done wrong?
This is a common scenario after students underwent Viva. Is it impossible to pass with flying colors? No, it is possible. And let's see how to transform your work to a winning thesis.
Hello and good day everyone. Is it difficult to pass your DRP or Viva excellently? Well, it's not easy, but it's also not difficult. How to achieve it? First, know what is expected, and second, write it right. If this combination is correct, you can easily win your examiner's attention to keep reading your report until the end. Today I'm going to share with you some of the common flaws observed by the examiners when examining your thesis, starting from the introduction until the conclusion chapter. On top of that, I will also share some tips to rectify the flaws to enhance the quality of your report. With this information, I hope you can produce a superb and a winning thesis. Before that, just some precautions. This information is based on my experience as an examiner, as well as a collections of ideas from other colleagues who had served as thesis examiners. Now, let's go straight to chapter 1. Okay, this is the window to your thesis. What are the flaws that generally exist in this chapter? First, the background is not clear. What does this mean? Here, students fail to provide a clear picture about the study scenario or the background that lead to an unclear motive of why the study needs to be conducted. Additionally, students do not introduce or briefly define the concept of variable used in the study in the earlier section, which sometimes make the examiners confused why the concept of variables suddenly appear in the problem statement and the research objectives or research questions. Next, students fail to make the connection between all the concept of variables used to better support the study. Okay, examiners need to be clear about your study context from the very beginning. To overcome this flaw, you need to explain clearly about the study setting or the scenario or what's happening in the industry. Tell your examiners what is actually happening and briefly highlight the area of concern. Define the concept of variables clearly at the beginning, example, in the early stage of your background of study. Describe the importance of the concept of variables and make sure that there is a logical flow of ideas that associate all the concept of variables with the main context of the study. Be a good storyteller is the key here. Second, it is about the problem statement. Generally, the common flaw is students do not articulate the problem statement well. Issues or opportunities are not clearly pointed out, and the literature used to support the argument or discussion is not recent or not relevant. On top of that, the literature is sometimes not sufficient to back up the problem statement. So, how can the examiner determine the problem statement provide a good base that warrant the study as beneficial to be conducted? Sometimes, the problem statement is written too long, which can lead to confusion or makes the examiner to spend more time to understand the overall idea. Finally, in this issue, students sometimes often miss out the justification of the study or the importance of the study, which always lead to the so what question by the examiner. Okay, how to write a good problem statement? Problem statement should be written in a precise manner, but it should clearly highlight the issue or the opportunity that the study is trying to offer. Describe the gap in the literature and justification on why the study is so important to be conducted. One tip on writing the justification of study is to rephrase the study significance and relate it with the aims of the study. And remember to use recent literature. Now, the next flaws is about research objective and research questions. The mistakes here are when the examiners found that the research objectives or research questions are not clear, or the research objectives or the research questions ignore some of the concepts or variables that have been discussed in the background study or that appear in the title of the study. Finally, the common flaws is the research questions do not reflect the research objectives. To rectify this, the research objectives or research questions need to be written clearly. Normally, it should contain the SMART characteristic, which is specific, measurable, achievable, reliable, and also timely. Research objective and research question should address all the variables involved and they should reflect each other well. Okay? Unclear scope of the study means students do not clearly explain the scope of the study. This is very important as it provides the boundary or coverage of a study. So, clearly spell out the study scope. I'll discuss about the significance of study in the conclusion chapter. Now, moving on to 2. This is about your literature. This is about your justification of your argument. So, what are the things or the flaws that examiners observe in this chapter? In general, the flaws observed in this chapter are as follows. First, unorganized presentation of information or ideas or unclear sources. Ideas presented are not cohesive, jumpy and disorganized, and it will be very tiring if the report is in an unorganized format. Additionally, sometimes students did not mention the search procedure that explain how the student exhausts the literature, the search engine used, type of journal used, the range of years, etc. Okay, how to improve on this? It's good to detail out your search procedure so that the examiners understand the process that you have involved in developing the base of your study. Specify the search engine. Indicate the number of journal or sources used. Inform the range of publication. Highlight the prominent authors you have cited, etc. These also serve as good input to other readers as well. When writing the literature, you have to be a very good storyteller. Explain from general to specific or according to the approach that you want to adopt. Ensure the terms or informations are consistent throughout the entire report. Format must be adhered and consistent. If the referencing style is APA, then everything must follow. Use proper headings and subheadings to ensure your explanation of the literature is clear and interesting. Avoid long sentences. Break up your sentences. Avoid the use of inappropriate connectors or the same connectors again and again. Use the various connectors, but make sure you use it at the appropriate places. The second flaw about literature is all about variables. What about variables? Among the flaws are the definition and explanation of the variables are not clear. The explanation is not sufficient, and sometimes the concept of variables are ignored in the literature. The next flaw is the variables are not connected to the main purpose of the study. To rectify this, students need to ensure all variables are explained clearly, or the context of the study need to be well explained, starting from the development, evolution, or other relevant information. Additionally, connections between the variables must be made clear and contribute to support the overall study purpose. Okay, third, description versus discussion. What is this? Basically, students merely describe or summarize the literature, whereas the literature needs to be discussed to better support the argument of your study. Minimal recent literature is used. Finally, the explanation on the theory used is not clear, and students do not really make a good connection between the theory and the study context. How to improve this? Especially for thesis, literature does not only need to be clear, but it also needs to be critically analyzed, synthesized, and make it related to the study context. Recent literature needs to be added to convince examiners about the latest updates happening in the area of study. How recent is recent? Well, it depends on the nature of study or area of study. Normally, examiners would like to have recent literature within 2 years from the current year. Finally, the theory used need to be relevant and tied well with the study context. And the final flaw is unmeaningful summary. Sometimes students provide summary just as a closing remark or to indicate what were covered in the chapter. By right, in the summary, students should provide a brief analysis of the literature that they have exhausted. For example, what's the focus of study on a similar area? What's the trend of data collection or data analysis, etc. From here, the students should be able to highlight the gap that lead to the study purpose. Okay, we are moving to chapter 3, which is the methodology. Okay, what are the common flaws in this chapter? Okay, let's look into the population and sample. The common feedback from examiners is the explanation on the sample is not clear. For example, the sample criteria was not specified, how the number of the sample size derived was not explained, the inappropriate sampling technique was used, and justification of why the sample was chosen was not provided. Next, looking at the research design, sometimes students fail to explain clearly about the research type or approach or research paradigm. Sometimes students miss the information of what is the unit of analysis, the time horizon, the study setting. Yeah, all of this information need to be supplied. Another component of methodology that examiners always focus is the instrumentation. Among the common flaws is unclear explanation on how the instrument was developed. Was it adopted or adapted? Another thing is the construction of the question itself, where sometimes examiners observe there are double or triple barrel questions, or sometimes the question seems not really measuring what it is supposed to measure, and this is definitely a validity issue. There are cases that the scale used are not really appropriate with the research objectives, and sometimes students did not mention about the instrument review process or the pretest as well as the pilot test procedure. The credibility of the reviewer is not described, and this leads to the question whether the question or the questionnaire used are valid or is it comprehensive. Now, for data collection, students sometimes did not delineate the process of data collection, starting from the initial process until the data was gathered. Finally, for data analysis, there are cases where results were presented without further clarification and displayed in an unorganized manner. Remember, examiners do have an eagle eye, so they can easily note inconsistent use of data in text, whether it's in text, in the tables, or the figures. In general, the overall comment for this chapter is methodology was not well explained or well justified, or the methodology chosen was not suitable and does not support the research objectives. So, to overcome these flaws, students must be very meticulous and rigorous in writing this chapter. We do not want you to write another research method book though, but we want you to explain in detail how you plan and execute your methodology explicitly. Okay, we are moving to chapter 4, which is the analysis and result, and here you have to report it well. Technically, some of the common flaws observed in this chapter include minimal explanation given on the analysis. Students provide all the analysis, which sometimes are not needed or which sometimes are not even relevant, but do not present the result with further explanation. Sometimes students use text instead of graphical or illustration to present the data. Additionally, the flaws include data was presented in an unorganized manner or repetition of idea or data communicated in a visual form and also in the text. Okay, for these sections, we have to be specific. Select only the relevant information that address your research objective. Explanation should be clear and sufficient. The key word here is be precise. It is good if the data can be visualized in an attractive but meaningful graphic to capture readers' attention. Text should complement the graphical info so that you don't have to write a lengthy explanation. Finally, be organized. Check your work meticulously and ensure all the information need to be consistent throughout the report. Common flaws for chapter 5. This is the findings and conclusion chapter, and here in this chapter you are going to make some offering based on your findings. The common flaws for chapter 5. First, findings do not answer or minimally discuss or relate with your research objectives or research questions. Second, the student just recapitulate the result from chapter 4 without giving further explanation about the findings of the study. The student's voice is very minimal here. Additionally, no argument was made with the existing literature. Third, significance of study was not detailed, not convincing, or not well articulated. Sometimes it is quite difficult to differentiate or students seems to be confused with the significance of study between theoretical and also practical significance. Fourth, limitation of the study provided are not actually the research limitations, but instead the researcher's limitation. For example, lack of budget, lack of time, etc. Finally, suggestions for future research are minimally offered, or some are not well justified according to the study context, or sometimes they are not even relevant with the identified limitation offered earlier. How can we improve these flaws? First, we have to ensure that all the research objectives and research questions are well answered. Perhaps one of the easiest solutions is to present your findings according to the research objective or the research questions. Next, the findings need to be discussed critically. Ensure to make comparison about your study findings and the existing literature, and offer some plausible explanation on the unique of your findings in your own word. We actually want to see the voice of the researcher. Third, the significance of the study must be made clear, precise, and organized. Indicate clearly who your audience are, for example, people or organizations, and how your study will benefit them. Dictate or explain clearly for each audience. Fourth, limitations and future research must be relevant and clearly written. Generally, we have covered all the chapters. However, there are some trivial but play a significant role to enhance the quality of your thesis, language, and writing style. First, you really need to write it right. If you submit a thesis with lots of grammatical and sentence structure errors, or even glaring spelling mistakes, not one or two, it's more than 5, or report with unorganized or non-cohesive ideas, or provide a report with poor navigation of the content, you will easily distract the examiner's focus and spoil their mood in evaluating. So, it is strongly advised for students to read and reread the thesis several times and use proper language. Additionally, it is strongly encouraged for the work to be sent to professional proofread services prior the final submission. On top of that, students must adhere to the format or required writing as well as the referencing style. There shouldn't be missing reference or improper heading and subheadings or incorrect labeling, etc. The key word here is meticulous. Okay, those are some of the tips to enhance your thesis writing. Okay, hopefully this helps you in producing a winning thesis. Till then, all the best.